Hi, all of my math folks. This is Miss Blanton back with you for our next TEK in our series, getting ready for our STAAR test. So today we're talking about 6.6c, multiple representations. Now, multiple representations, basically, we're talking about relationships. We're looking at relationships between two items. It could be miles and hours. It could be how long you study versus how many questions you get right. We're wanting to see relationships. And so my biggest clue to you is what is happening to the x for us to get y. They're going to give you an x and a y variable. We're wondering what happened. There are two options. Either you multiplied x times a number and you get your y, or you add a number to your x to get a y. So we're either multiplying or we're adding to the x, at least for 6th grade. Later on in 7th and 8th grade, you'll do some more with that. But for now, we're going to multiply or we're going to add. So when we read our word problems, we've got to figure out, what are they talking about here? What is this relationship going on between the two? So I've drawn here a table for us to evaluate. We've got, remember, tables have our y-axis and our x-axis. X-axis is always horizontal, y-axis is always vertical. When you look at your table, it'll tell you some more information. This one are hours worked and how much money we have earned. So this could be, a word problem could be about babysitting. If I babysit for 1 hour, I get $5. If I babysit for 2 hours, I get, looks like my dot's at $10. 3 hours, looks like I get $15. Okay, so let's talk about what is happening to x to get to y. Ultimately, we're wanting to figure out one of these two equations for it. So I'm just going to write down some information I know. I'm going to start by writing down my 3 ordered pairs. Remember, ordered pairs are x, y. So I've got 1, 5. You start with the x-axis. Then I have 2, 10. And 3, 15. Okay, can you see a relationship? What's happening to the x to get our y? Well, if you don't see it yet, we can always draw a table. This actually almost looks like a table in your homework. So I'm going to put my x's on this side and my y's on that side. So my first ordered pair was 1, 5. My second ordered pair was 2, 10, and my third ordered pair was 3, 15. Now I'm wanting to know, what is happening to x to get to the y? Something's either being multiplied to the x to get to the y, or it's being added to the x to get to the y. Well, and it's always going to be the same thing, no matter what the x is. It's all, whatever x we get, we have to do the same thing to get to the y. So let's look. From 1 to 5. Well, I'm multiplying by 5, and I'm also, or I'm adding 4. Okay, well, let's see which one I find in the other ones. 2 to 10. 2 times 5 is 10, but 2 plus 4, so times 5 works, but plus 4 does not work. Times 5 worked up here, and plus 4, I forgot to write that down. But this plus 4 rule did not work, so Okay, let's see if our times 5 works for this one. 3 times 5 gets me 15. So my times 5 rule worked. So I'm going to be using this format for my equation. So I have whatever x is, I'm going to multiply by 5. So I would write 5x. And then let's just plug in our values for x just to make sure that works. So 5, and we're going to plug in the values for x. Again, you see this on your homeworks. So I'll use a different color here. I'm going to plug in 1. 5 times 1 is 5. Good. Plug in 2. 5 times 2 is 10. Good. Plug in 3. 5 times 3 is 15. So the equation for this scenario would be our multiplying. Would be y equals, of course, the y's on this side, but we're just going to kind of put it on the other side. Y equals 5x. That would be the equation for this relationship. However many hours you work, that's x. You multiply it by 5, and you get how much money you earned. Okay, so the big thing for these type of word problems are you've got to figure out what your x is and what your y variable is. For this one, x was how many hours, and y was how much money we earned. Okay, it could be, sometimes you might see your table like this, and it's an x, y table, and there's not that space in the middle. Okay, and you've got your numbers here. Still, x is always the first one, y is always the second one. Now, STAAR likes to trick you a little bit, and sometimes they might play around with you and put in a letter like T and N. Same thing. Our T would be our X, and our N would be our Y. Okay? The X is always the first one. So same thing over here. This would be our T, and that would be our Y. So they like to trick us like that. They could also, let's see, another one. They like to use Q and R. Okay? If it's in the first column, it's the X. And if it's in the second column, it's the Y, which would be the R. Why they don't just use X and Y, I don't know. I don't make up the test. But we know the first column in our table is always the X value. The second column is always the Y value. The horizontal line is always the X line, and the vertical line is always the Y line in our graphs. Okay, that sums up our multiple representations. Good luck on that STAAR test, and I will see you in our next video.